Start recording. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, teachers and students. Today, I'm going to share with you in this presentation on the topic My Learners, My Pedagogies, with a subtitle Learners Determine Instructional Strategies. My name is Emmanuel Apia. I'm the CEO of ICANN Ghana, former Cambridge educator, educationist, IT expert, and an artist as well. Let's quickly start with our topics for the day. First of all, you all agree with me that connection and good relationships is a key factor to effective teaching and learning. And therefore, as teachers, we need to find every method or every way to make sure that there is good connection or relationships between you and your teachers. What are some of the effective ways to ensure that there is good communication or good relationship between you and your teachers? The usual one has always been talking to your students in the classroom, talking to them outside the classroom or during break time. But we can also look at a common hack for your students, saying well done, writing notes for them, praising them when they do something right, saying thank you, and then respecting their views. What about calling home to check up on them, even on holidays and weekends? We can also think about how we can always praise our students by not just looking at whenever they do something wrong. That is where we feel like talking to our students. The more we work with students this way, they are likely not to listen to us because for most teachers, unless a student do something wrong, they don't have anything to do with their students. And therefore, for educators and as teachers, we need to always make sure that we build good connection with our students, even outside the classroom, outside the school compound, and outside our environment with them. Another factor that we can consider to ensure there is effective teaching and learning is starting activities upfront. This is when you prepare your activities for the day and then you give it to your students at your entrance or before the learners enter the classroom. So in this case, as they enter the class, they have a task at hand and therefore quickly they are expected to move on to the task and start working. In this way, the students will not be struggling with where to sit, talking, and the teacher will not spend time telling them to keep quiet, sit down, get settled, and so on and so forth. Let's look at the second one, proper lesson preparation. I know teachers will accept or will agree with me that if you don't plan your lessons very well, if you don't take into an account what each time or each minute of the lesson, what will be done within each minute, obviously your students are going to end up talking, and as a result, the teacher is likely not to achieve the aims or the objectives for the lesson. So what are some of the things that as teachers we need to do? We need to make sure that about 90% of the lesson time is given to our teachers. This is to say that the students are supposed to do more activities and then the teacher will do less of the lesson activities. You state your lesson objectives, greetings, your big ideas, your keywords, starter activities. All of these should be incorporated into your lesson and with time bound. So for proper lesson preparation, teachers must make sure that they factor into their time closure activities as well as exit cards. Another factor to consider to ensure that there is effective teaching and learning is practicing asynchronous and synchronous online lessons, and then transferring such ideas into the physical classroom. This is where teachers provide learners with resources like videos, printouts, and online sites for learners to go home or learn on their own before coming for a lesson. Task students instead of asking students. By this, teachers are supposed to make sure that all students respond to questions, but not just one specific student who will be talking for the rest to listen. In such an instance, the entire class is supposed to be working, or the entire class is supposed to be responding to questions that the teacher may ask or their friends may ask. You may do this in groups. You may ask the groups to write down their responses to questions and their responses to things that are very challenging in the classroom. You may also think about question time. That means that whenever a question is asked, you need to make sure that you reserve some time for the entire class to think about it. Mostly teachers will ask a question, and then the first hand that will pop up is the very first hand that the teacher will call. In this modern or in this 21st century, some of these practices downgrade the abilities of other learners who may need time to think about some of these ideas before responding to it. And therefore, as teachers, we need to make sure that we give enough time for the entire class to think about our questions before calling or before asking the whole class to um, respond to your questions. Give a new look. Give a new look. As teachers, we should not base learners' activities, or we should not base our learners' records, or we should not base our learners' academic performance on our previous records, because it is possible that a student A did not perform well in a previous lesson or in a previous test, but in a new one, there is a possibility of the student performing very well. Likewise, student B might have done well in a previous lesson or a previous test, but in the new one, there is a possibility of the student not performing up to expectation. And therefore, as teachers and as educators, we need to make sure that we give a new look to our students, a new look to our students. We need to review our lessons. We need to make sure that we don't rely on our previous lesson plans to deliver the same lesson in almost every lesson that we do for the week. Expectations or questions before a lesson. As teachers and as educators, some of the practices that we can implement to ensure effective teaching and learning is asking our students to write down their expectations or their questions before we start the term or before a lesson begins. You need to make sure that your students have written down certain questions or certain things that they want to know about the topic. Then, as the lesson goes on, you address each question or each expectation as it has been written by your students. Pair or match learners. This is an effective way to ensure effective teaching and learning in and around the school. As teachers, we need to put into practice the idea of pairing learners, especially students who are struggling. We need to pair them with students who are getting or grasping the understanding of concepts. This is to say that we can even refer our students to their seniors in different class. We can refer students to students in different classrooms. And then we can even go ahead and refer students to other students who are in different countries so that they share ideas on global citizens, global learners, or global perspective concepts. How do you do this? We can use tools like Empathical to connect your classroom to others, to other classroom for your learners to enjoy or learn from such classrooms as well. As teachers, we need to address learner challenges individually. Mostly teachers address learner challenges by generalizing it. This concept doesn't really help in helping learners identify their challenges or areas where they are finding difficulties. In most cases, teachers group or generalize things for all learners. For instance, instead of asking or telling your students to work on grammar, the teacher is supposed to be specific to tell the students to, let's say, work on spellings. Being specific will give the students a deeper understanding of what is expected of the students. This is to say that we need to motivate our students with words of encouragement, seek for their basic needs before we think about their academic needs as well. Collaborate with colleague teachers and other classrooms. As we are connecting our students to different classrooms, we as teachers or as educators must also look at how we can connect to other classrooms and to other teachers to experience what they do in their classrooms. We need to learn from others. We need to sign up for PD sections, boot camps, and educational meetings that will enhance personal development and then learn new and effective teaching and learning practices. We need to be abreast with technology and modern pedagogy. Sometimes, as teachers, we need to learn from our students as well. If possible, pretend as if you are learning from them. This way, you will boost the morale of your students to learn more. Before each lesson or before a term begins, as a teacher, it is a very good practice to let your learners set their targets or their goals for the term. So you do this with your students. You sit them down, you refer them to their previous records. Then, based on that, you let them predetermine or you let them set their goals and targets for the term. Now, as the term goes on, if they are failing, you need to prompt them as a teacher that looking at how things are going, it is not possible for them to meet the targets, and therefore they need to catch up or they need to work extra harder. Besides this, you need to alert them towards achieving the goals if they are improving or if truly they are working towards that. As teachers, you need to also work on that by alerting your students to work harder towards achieving their goals, even though they are still working um, towards it. Educational educational trips or invitation of an expert. As teachers, it is possible that we may not be familiar or we may not understand almost every aspect of the content that we teach our students. And therefore, it is very important to organize educational trips or invite an expert within your school or from outside the school to deliver lessons on specific content or specific areas that you may be struggling with as a teacher. A trip to have a feel of practical skills and developing deeper understanding of theories. In most cases, some schools or some institutions or some classrooms may be lacking physical activities or physical materials or tools that students may need to interact with to develop deeper understanding. And therefore, in such an instance, it will be very important for the teacher to organize field trips or educational trips for the students to go and have a feel of how the tools and materials are being used as the theory is also being learned in the school. Another very important aspect of teaching or effective modern teaching and learning is student-led lesson, or what we call the flipped classroom. In this case, teachers allow students to lead the classroom. Teachers task students to prepare a lesson and then deliver to their classmates or to their class. In this case, the students become the core or the facilitators for the lesson, and then the teachers will then facilitate the lesson and then work out or clarify areas or specific areas that will need deeper understanding. So it is very important for modern educators to allow their students to lead the classroom or flip the class so that the students will become the center or will become the facilitators. This is to say that we can even encourage peer-to-peer learning. Classroom management strategies. As teachers, we need to make sure that we implement effective classroom management strategies. Instead of shouting and telling the students to keep quiet, rather pretend and ask them to share what they were talking about the lesson to the rest of the class. The use of attention seekers or attention graphs is also very important in the classroom as well. Proper seating or um, sitting arrangements will also ensure that there is less of distraction in the classroom. Teachers must be intentional about each sitting arrangement that goes on in the classroom. All classroom routines should not be expected to be followed instantly. This is because there may be plenty or a lot of classroom expectations, and therefore the teacher expecting all the learners to be abreast with all the expectation within a very short period of say 1 week or 1 day. It will become very difficult for the learners to cope with that, and therefore teachers should look at the consequences of the classroom routines and then the possible um, ways of solving some of these or addressing some of these classroom routine problems. Teachers must be purposeful about the content or the learner age appropriate content. Teachers must be purposeful about what they are teaching their learners. This is to say that the content that you are teaching your learners is to be age appropriate. Learning is supposed to be meaningful to the learner, and therefore if what you are teaching the learners is not something which is meaningful or is not something that they can use in their daily lives, then there is no need for you to teach them. An example is that mathematics should be able to help kids, and mathematics should be able to help kids to do simple exchange in terms of buying and selling with money. Science or electricity topics should teach children safety measures at home and when using electronic devices as well. Assessment should be used as a tool for improving. Assessment should be used to guide learners towards improving, but not specifically for records purposes. Use both summative and formative assessment techniques. Allow your students to assess your performance regularly as a teacher as well. It is a very good practice to allow your students or even colleague teachers to assess or give you feedback on each lesson that you deliver. In this way, you being a teacher, you will develop or you will improve on your lessons, and then assessing the students too will get better each time. Use alternative forms of assessment. For example, it is not always that you have to give your students written tests or written assignment or written examination. Test or examination could be in the form of verbal, storytelling, discussions, or drawing and audio recording. Imagine giving students the opportunity to record or tell what they have learned out of a topic in the form of stories or discussions, drawings or audio recordings. All these forms could be a way of assessing our learners instead of always telling students to write or respond to our questions on paper. Try and identify learner difficulties. As educators, we need to be abreast with our learner difficulties. This is to say that we need to look out for the academic challenges, behavioral challenges, emotional and family, plus cultural backgrounds. Probably student Amma couldn't submit her homework because last night there was lights out in the house, and therefore Amma couldn't get light to do her homework. Teachers must understand students from some of these angles as well. A student may be struggling emotionally from a specific topic. For example, a teacher may ask a student to write on a murder case. Meanwhile, this specific student or some of these students might have experienced a murder case, and therefore this is going to cause some kind of emotional effects regarding what you have asked them to write about. And therefore, as teachers, we need to understand our learners and our students from different angles. Differentiate your instructions. This is a common practice among 21st century teachers. Differentiation has become a very common practice among students and teachers. And therefore, as educators, we need to make sure that we implement all forms of differentiations, or we need to implement different kinds of pedagogical strategies when it comes to dealing with our students. For instance, examination can take the form of project works, different assessment models, quiz, among others. The use of visuals, audiovisuals, charts, graphs, videos, and grouping, trips, among others, could be implemented as a form of differentiation in the classroom. Another important factor is art integration. Teachers can integrate both visual and performing art concepts to differentiate lessons for the learners to have deeper understanding of concepts. Classroom environment. The classroom environment is one great factor that affects teaching and learning. Obviously, your classroom is supposed to be neat, well arranged, learner materials being posted on your walls. Then another factor we need to consider is replacing those posters frequently, and then also using the students' own works plus printed works to decorate or to be pasted on walls or notice boards in your classroom. Safety measures should also be printed and pasted in your classroom as well. Project learner voice. As teachers and educators, we need to project our learners' voice in and outside the classroom. For instance, as teachers, we can keep our learners' works on social media, in school magazines, and then on school notice boards to celebrate our learners, for others to also have a feel of what our learners are doing. This is to say that we can tolerate the differences of our learners, both for those who are doing well and those who are not meeting our expectation. We need to celebrate their little achievements as well by projecting their learners using different media like social media, putting their works on social media and tagging them on their wall or tagging them on their social media platforms, using the school magazines and notice board as well. Peer marking. This is very important. Learners assessing or marking their students or classmates' work is very important. This is because learners will be able to write their comments or what they think their friends should have included in their project or write-up. This will also give time or much experience to the teacher, since a lot of comments or a lot of things will come from their peers as they mark or assess their students' work. So teachers, as 21st century teachers, we can put in place peer marking among our learners. By doing this, learners learn to broaden their understanding, because some points may not have been addressed by some students, and as they go through reading their friends' works, they get to know some of the things that they did not include in their presentations or project works. Call learners by their names correctly. As teachers, it will be very important, or it is very important for you to address your learners using their correct names. We don't have to put unnecessary comments about students' names and then the spellings. We need to avoid unnecessary comments about names, cultural backgrounds, handwriting, voice, dressing, family or student struggles. We need to understand our learners from different angles. Some learners learn from others, and therefore, as teachers, we must understand our learners from different angles. We should avoid comparing their grades to that of others by not giving up on their low performing activities among others. In conclusion, I want to say that the purpose of education should be about understanding oneself, the people, their immediate environment, and the world at large. Teachers should facilitate learners to predict problems and initiate solutions to prevent them from happening. Teachers should implement effective instructional strategies to spark learners in inventing machinery, creativity, innovation, leadership skill, communication, empathy, kindness, critical thinking, problem solving, and caring for the environment. Learners should be supported with the requisite tools and materials to facilitate learning and skills acquisition. Encourage hands-on practical activities. Another thing that needs to be considered is that a teacher might have taught for 5, 3, 10, or 15 years, but that is not a sign of being a good teacher. Teachers must always learn new and more effective methods. Find out how your learners learn and teach according to their learning style. Child safety and child protection measures. During break time, there should also be break supervision. All these factors will come together to ensure that teachers ensure effective teaching and learning in the classroom. Thank you very much for your time. In another presentation, I will specifically address each and every topic on its own. Kindly note that your views and comments are welcome. You can also share with me your suggestions or the things that are working for you as a teacher so that we can implement or add it in our next presentation. Thank you for your time and see you another time.